Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my March wrap-up. I read 7 books in the month of March, which is a number that I'm really happy with because I managed to fit a few shorter books in there at the end of the month just to I don't want to think of it as reading a higher number of books, but I was feeling a little bit maybe unmotivated or a little bit fatigued just with the number of really long books I was reading. I didn't feel like I was progressing or finishing things, so it really kind of made me feel good about my own progress that I was able to slip a few shorter books in this month. And my ratings were also extremely high. My enjoyment was really good this month, so I had 1 4.25 star and then 3 each of 4.5 and 5 star reads. So that's phenomenal, and I usually go in order of rating. I'll start with the lowest rated book and I'll move upwards, but I think that this wrap-up makes sense to organize a little bit differently, and we'll get into why, because a few of these books I think just kind of pair with one another. A couple of them quite literally pair with one another, but yeah, we will get into it. Hello. There's a visitor. Okay, so I am actually going to start with my lowest rated book of the month, which is a 4.25 stars, which is obviously not a low rating at all. But that was The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington, and I don't have the physical copy of this with me because I got it from the library for when I was reading it, and this was picked for me by Patrick from Patrick Leo, and that was for my March edition of Reading Booktuber's Favorite Books. So I do have a dedicated video review for The Shadow of What Was Lost, so I won't go too deep into it here because my vlog has lots of my thoughts from throughout the reading experience, and then I talk more about my overall thoughts at the end. But like I said, a 4.25 star is a good rating. I enjoyed the book. I clearly enjoyed it more than most people on BookTube, I would say, because it's a surprise to me how this series isn't super popular, but I just thought that it was overall a very well done book. So in The Shadow of What Was Lost, we are following our main character Davian and a couple of his friends that are also POV characters, Ashalia and Were. And basically we kind of follow them on a quest type of storyline where they leave the magic school where they were being raised after an incident happens there, and they kind of have to find ways to strike out on their own because each of them are looking to achieve different goals, and they are looking to kind of find out what is happening behind the scenes and why the thing that happened to them did happen. And they are learning more information about their world and politics, and there is sort of an ancient enemy that is stirring to the north, which sounds like a very classic fantasy thing, and it is, but I don't know, I just found the characters in this book to be engaging. I liked them. The plot was interesting. I'm not really sure how to describe the plot without going into spoilers, but I thought that it was well plotted and well paced, and all in all it was just a pretty interesting read that I had a good time with, and so I definitely do want to continue in the series, and I'm glad that Patrick gave me the push that I needed to actually read that book, because I've had it on my Kindle for a while and it was just languishing on there without being touched. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that The Shadow of What Was Lost is doing anything groundbreaking, but it was just good, and I am really very interested in a certain character who has a mysterious past, and it seems like things could get really interesting for them, and just overall I'm interested to see where the plot is going to go, and according to Patrick, the trilogy has a very satisfying conclusion, so I am looking forward to continuing with that at some point. Now, the second 2 books I am going to go into together, and the reason for that is because I finished both A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, the second and third A Song of Ice and Fire books, in March. So I read the bulk of A Clash of Kings in February. I just didn't actually, I wasn't able to finish it in February, so it got counted towards March, and then I read all of A Storm of Swords in March. So these are both 5-star books for me. These are absolutely the pinnacle of the series. I loved Clash of Kings, but A Storm of Swords is truly my favorite of the series, and this read just reminded me of why I love it so much. And I just think it's crazy that A Storm of Swords is such a long book, but it just earns its length with everything that happens. There are things that I forgot happened so early in the series, like book 3 out of 5, and when I finished A Storm of Swords, I was left thinking, based on my memory of this series, what is even left to happen in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons? So I don't know how I'm gonna feel about the 4th and 5th books, just because so much of the stuff that I loved about the series was in these 2 volumes right here. But the characters, their actions, their motivations, them driving the plot, and the things that happen in the plot being so dramatic and juicy, but making sense, and just everything about these books is the best of fantasy to me. These truly are. They were my introduction to adult fantasy, and I don't think there could have been a better one. Maybe there could have been a better stepping stone, but in terms of quality, I love these so much. It did not change on reread, so that's it. It's just a gush. Like I mentioned, these were both 5 stars. Of course, I wanted to talk about them together, so that's that. And yeah, I'm reading A Feast for Crows this month. So next up, I will just briefly talk about one of my other 4.5-star reads, because I am going to have a dedicated review coming out for this book since it's about to be released, and that is Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. Can I just say that I have missed Fonda Lee's writing so much. I forgot how much that was a factor in how much I enjoyed the Greenbone saga. I think that while prose and writing definitely does stick with me after I read a book if it's impactful, Fonda Lee just has this sort of writing where it's not necessarily that you remember it for being flowery or particularly chock full of turns of phrase or particularly pretty writing, but she just has such a skill at impactful writing. So it's kind of simple. Well, it's not right to call it simple, but the writing itself is not trying to do anything too fancy, but it's her choice of words and her cadence and everything that comes together to just make me love her writing so much. And so I think that's a big part of what led to me rating this novella 4.5 stars. I'm not really going to go into the plot aside from the fact that we are following Esther, our main character, who experienced a manticore attack on her home when she was younger, and so her life goal has become to fly these giant bird animals called rocks that they kind of are part of a chapter of the serving the royal family that hunts manticores. And so we follow her journey through that, but the strength for me was really just the plot and everything, and the pacing was strong, but I think a lot of the times with novellas, I don't feel like I have enough time. Even if the story is the right length for a novella, I just want more time if I'm enjoying it. Not because the author has done anything wrong, but just because I want to spend more time with it. But her writing just made this phenomenal, and so yeah, I will have a full review coming out for that, but Untethered Sky is definitely worth a read in my opinion. If you already know you like Fonda Lee, I would definitely recommend it, and if you don't have any experience with her, this could be a great way to try out her writing and see if it's your style. The next book that was 4.5 stars for me was The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons, which is the second book in A Chorus of Dragons, and this series is just so fun. It is absolutely a wild ride, and I said that in my Goodreads review as well. Much like The Ruin of Kings, it is quite difficult to describe like what's going on here without actually going into spoilers. So suffice it to say, in the name of all things, we still get to spend some time with the characters that we introduced in the first book. However, the bulk of this story is following a different set of characters, and so these first two installments are kind of like, okay, now we've gotten to meet the entire cast, like we've gotten some experience, we learn about what their stories are to this point, and then from the third book to the fifth book, it kind of seems like, okay, now we've set up the characters, we're ready for all of them to go like progress on to the rest of the story. Because while I have started the third book now, and it still has the element of like people telling stories from multiple timelines and having footnotes, it seems to be jumping around just a little bit less in terms of like a wider span of time, because these first two books are almost telling like an entire life story up to the point we were at, whereas now it seems like the timeline jumping is more like, okay, this is a shorter time in the past. We're gonna fill you in on what happened between the last book and now for these people, but it's not like we're going back years and years unless there's something that needs to be contextualized, context provided. So I really enjoyed the characters that are introduced in this one as well. I would call this series a little bit confusing, but not in a bad way, because I do believe that while it might be difficult to remember everything, if something is important and then it comes up again, Jen Lyons will definitely prompt you to like remember what we're talking about and where we encountered this in the past and why it's important. And I think it's impressive how like natural she is at doing that. Like it doesn't feel forced. So I just think that, and I think I said this in the Ruin of Kings wrap up as well, but I'm impressed by like how many kind of balls she keeps in the air, how many things she's juggling, and makes it flow well. And so the magic in this series is pretty cool. Like the races and cultures that we get introduced to, they're all very interesting. The characters are likable, they're very vibrant, they're funny. There's some great queer rep in here as well. I would definitely call this like just using the term from the fantasy bingo card this year, like a queer norm setting. I don't know if that's like a well-known term that I just haven't heard before, but essentially just the fact that in this world, it's like you don't bat an eye at that type of thing. So I really enjoy reading from worlds like that. And so this has that, what's it called? Mask of Mirrors. The Rook and Rose series has that as well. So that's a great like little feature as well. And so these books are just really, really enjoyable. I did take a month off. I did not read the third book in March as I had planned, but I am reading it now in April, and so far I'm greatly enjoying it, and I'm really excited to be back in this world. Okay, so finally we have a 4.5 star and my final 5-star read that I also feel kind of go together, even though like on a surface level they don't, but I feel like thematically they're really kind of exploring some similar ground. So first of all, the 4.5 star read is Chernobyl Prayer by Svetlana Alexievich. And so this is, to put it simply, this is a collection of interviews where Svetlana Alexievich interviewed people who experienced Chernobyl. So this is anyone from like cleanup workers to the wives or families of cleanup workers to like regular people who were either displaced by Chernobyl or decided to come back and live in the exclusion zone, to like Communist Party secretaries, to scientists, to like everybody that she could possibly get access to and speak to, she did speak to and ask them about their experiences with Chernobyl. And so I think that this book should be of interest to anyone. I discovered it because I was looking for books that were published in the year that I was born, so this is an updated version, and it was, I believe, updated in the 2000s, but it was originally published in 1997. So you should have seen my face when in the introduction of this book, 9/11 is mentioned. And I thought, how'd they know about that in 1997? Anyway, that is off topic. But the point is, this has been updated. It's obviously been translated because this would not have been written in English originally. But this was haunting, emotional, definitely heavy, but also like inspiring in certain ways as well, and also like I would say illuminating and educational, because it's very, very interesting and fascinating to read from like the source, like these actual people's perspectives about the Soviet Union, their experiences, like what happened to them during Chernobyl, the like hiding of information, the way that the government approached it, everything, like the way that people were treated, the way that they were like lied to, but then also rewarded for sacrifice. But there's this overriding like idea that Soviet people were very willing to sacrifice and like be a hero for their country, or I guess for the Communist Party, since obviously the Soviet Union didn't comprise just one country. And so this was very educational in a lot of ways, like geopolitically and also like scientifically. I found the scientists' perspectives of particular interest, just because I personally think it would have been terrifying to actually understand the impact of this disaster when it did happen, and to know that the way the government was responding was not sufficient and was going to put so many people in danger. And like I feel extremely deeply for the people who were affected by this, that had no idea the kind of danger they were in, and so therefore they like ingested a lot of contamination. It deeply affected their health and their families, but they also didn't know, so there wasn't that like fear, that deep-rooted fear, and that doesn't make it any better. Like they still suffered, but I think that it would have been heart-wrenching to be somebody who knew what was going on and to see other people being affected by it, but not being able to protect themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, this is a really powerful book, and it definitely reflects a lot on like the power of the atom, the view of like nuclear power, and even just science in general before versus after, how the Chernobyl disaster was essentially the fall of the Soviet Union, so many things. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this if you're interested in history or science, or both. It was very, very good. Then my final 5-star for the month of March was When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut. And this is fictionalized history. This is about science as well. This chronicles the lives and discoveries of some of the major like mathematicians, mathematicians, and physicists. I just mixed those together, kind of the 20th century, and like kind of bleeding from the 19th century into the 20th century. We kind of like start in World War I, and we follow quite a few people and their discoveries and the impact that those discoveries had on the scientific community and the world. And so there's a lot of kind of like sensationalized storytelling in here. Like I don't doubt that not all of this is fact. Like there were liberties taken with telling these stories in order to make them work like in a narrative sense, like in a fictional narrative sense. But at the same time, this was so engaging to read and so interesting. And I think that the science, like extremely complex, like physics and math concepts, were presented in here in a way that, like, you might not understand them when you read them. Like, you're probably not gonna understand, like, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle just from reading this book if you don't kind of, like, understand the science, but you're at the very least gonna understand it on a surface level, and I think that it's presented really well in that sense. And the reason that I think that this kind of goes hand in hand with Chernobyl Prayer is because, like, thematically, there's also a lot of discussion in here about like what science should or shouldn't do, the impact that science has on the human side of things, and the fact that, like, for example, somebody that developed a, like, gas that was used as warfare in World War I that killed a lot of people also invented a way to produce nitrogen that allowed population growth on Earth and saved, like, billions of lives, or, well, millions of lives from famine. And it's like, I enjoyed these books for the way that they kind of, like, philosophize about science and how we really need to consider the impact. And, like, it's kind of the idea that, like, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Like, science can obviously go too far. And I think what I really liked about these is that they do think about future possibilities, but they're both very grounded in the very real world examples of, like, when these things have happened and what the impacts were of that, and the fact that, like, you can't necessarily foresee or conceptualize the impacts right away. You kind of have to wait and see what they are, and that's the dangers of it. And this was really well written. I read it so fast. If you like science, once again, or history, 10 out of 10 recommend. So yeah, I loved this. So I think that just about covers everything. Those are the 7 things that I read in the month of March. I was obviously very happy with them. They were some fantastic books that I had a lot of fun with. So please let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments if you've read any of these, or if you think you might now that you've heard about them. And yeah, so please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post new videos on most Mondays and Thursdays. And as always, I will have my joint Discord with Ben and my socials linked in the description below if you're interested in any of that stuff. And with that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!